The treatment of monoclonal antibodies using the Regeneron is designed for people that are at risk of hospitalization due to COVID-19. It's for people who are either COVID positive or who are high risk and have been exposed to somebody who is COVID positive. This is not saying this is the only thing that you need to be doing. I mean, of course, you know, a vaccine is designed to prevent, ideally prevent infection. I think that that's probably not happened to the extent we had hoped.
That's an understatement. Hospital beds and ICU units are filled to capacity in both Florida and Texas, thanks in part to poor leadership. Florida recently surpassed 3 million individual COVID cases. Under Governor Ron DeSantis, Florida's education department has given school districts in Broward and Alachua counties until today to either ban mask mandates or face a fine. Meanwhile, in Texas, Governor Greg Abbott's ban on school mask mandates is on hold after the Texas Supreme Court declined to back his order. And Abbott says he now tested negative for COVID-19 just 4 days after testing positive, thanks in part to being fully vaccinated. Here to talk about the madness in Texas and Florida is James Moore, who's been writing and reporting on Texas politics since the mid-1970s and publishes a weekly newsletter about the state called Texas to the World on Substack, and Mark Caputo, senior writer for Political. Thank you both very much for coming to the Sunday show. Let me start with you, Mr. Moore. Let me play, once again, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick.
The COVID is spreading, particularly most of the numbers are with the unvaccinated, and the Democrats like to blame Republicans on that. Well, the biggest group in most states are African Americans who have not been vaccinated. And the last time I checked, over 90% of them vote for Democrats in their major cities and major counties.
Mr. Moore, what's been the reaction to that nonsense from the Lieutenant Governor?
There's been a fair amount of backlash, Jonathan, but they don't care. Look, these guys continue to look for scapegoats, people to blame, instead of urging people to use a mask and get vaccinated. What we're dealing with in Texas is a state leadership that is saying, well, it's the immigrants. And when blaming the immigrants did not get any traction, ultimately what happened was because the border counties are among the most vaccinated with the lowest infection rates, and the immigrants as a group have low infection rates, then they started looking for someone else, and they blamed African Americans. There's been backlash, as I suggested, but not completely. And then when you have a governor whose message is to people, well, get vaccinated if you want, but we're not going to make our children wear masks. We're not going to make people in state and city and county institutions wear masks. The message is, you're kind of on your own. And as a consequence, and I think this is the most frustrating thing about this whole thing for me with our governor and the leadership of this state, and that's simply that they've made no connection between their messaging and their behavior and the fact that people are dying, and it's happening over and over. And again, as you suggested, we have a leadership that is at war with its own state. The counties, the schools, the cities, they all want to institute masks and say, let's keep people safe, but the governor doesn't want that to happen. So there's lawsuits back and forth. And the Supreme Court that you mentioned, who said the mask mandates could go ahead, he appointed 5 of the justices who ruled that way. So even people on the conservative bench in this state are saying, wait a minute, Governor, what in the world is going on with you? It's a terrible situation. I've started calling it Tex-Ganistan because it feels that chaotic.
And that's a good point to point out that the governor appointed most of the folks in the Supreme Court, and even they are defying him. Mark, what's the view in Florida? I mean, James said a moment ago that, you know, Republicans and the lieutenant governor, they don't care about the backlash. And it seems from everything that we've been watching the last few weeks, neither does Governor DeSantis.
Well, there's a bit of a backlash. If you look at some of the polling, DeSantis's shine has been knocked off of him a bit, but he still is probably in positive approval territory. DeSantis's administration is actively sharing this new article from the New York Magazine saying that the science of masking kids at schools is uncertain, and that's based on a CDC study. So they're keeping their head down and plowing forward, and as you can tell, And as we discussed earlier, Florida is essentially on a collision course with the White House because President Biden's administration has promised to financially support schools that would be penalized by the state of Florida for requiring universal masking. And it's also offered some measure of legal help, or at least made the offer of providing it in the future. It's not quite clear exactly what they could do. But we now have kind of a local school board revolt against Ron DeSantis. Four of the biggest counties, I should say, 3 in Southeast Florida, 1 in Tampa, and then there's Sarasota County, and there's Alachua County, which is where Gainesville is, University of Florida. Those counties have revolted and said, look, we're going to require universal masking. You can penalize us. We'll take you to court, and that's kind of actively wending its way through, the system currently. I think today the state has given a deadline for Broward and Alachua counties to comply with the state's mandate, or better said, the state's rule that says that you can mandate masks, but you can have a parental opt-out. If that goes forward, well, there's going to be some sort of interesting politics to it. But the science is kind of changing, and our understanding of the virus is changing. Like, our infection rates here are really high. Hospitalization rates are really high. It does appear that cases are plateauing, but they're plateauing at a really high level.
At a really high level. Mark, one more question to you. The president has made veiled remarks about Governor DeSantis and also Governor Abbott about, if you're not going to help, at least get out of the way. Has Governor DeSantis responded in any way to the veiled comments from the president?
Well, yeah, at one point when that was said a few weeks ago, DeSantis kind of changed the subject to kind of James' point earlier to talk about immigrants at the border and saying, kind of, you get out of our way. It's kind of a politically dysfunctional situation. The good news is at least the state health agencies, the federal health agencies, and the emergency management agencies are talking to each other, even as there's this high-level political disagreement between these political leaders. So right. The system appears to still be working, but as I noted earlier, I think we have something like 17,000 people currently hospitalized in the state. It's really high.
All right, because of the breaking news and Tropical Storm Henry, we are out of time. James Moore and Mark Caputo, thank you very much for coming to the Sunday Show. We'll